Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new live stream from Millennium 7. And thank you very, very much for coming online tonight to watch an old man with a beard. And tonight we are going to talk about the recent events in the Middle East and the recent conflict between Israel and Iran. Let's wait a minute to let people coming online. So Canon Fodder, thank you. Thank you for being here. Ken Villages, good evening. Dr. Tubes, good evening. A Wolf Among Us, welcome. Mark Vrem, welcome. Yes, I'm not asleep. As you can see, it's 1 o'clock in Europe. Yes, I'm 1 o'clock in Central European time. I mean, Italian time. So welcome to this live stream from at a time and a place that is very unusual. It is 1 o'clock in the night, and this is Italy. Before, I want to explain you a couple of things before immediately starting. So I'm doing this because now I am in the basement of my house in Italy. You may ask why. Well, because in Italy, we are exactly in the middle of a heat wave, and this house doesn't have air conditioning. So the basement is the coolest place, in the sense it's cold, is the coolest place in the house. And yeah, it is the only place where I can probably stay without melting away in a puddle of sweat. This is a very basic setup. I'm a bit thin on the ground because this is the first of a new live stream cycles. I'm just still you just 2 seconds to explain what is happening. I am moving back in Italy, as some of the most loyal viewers already know, because it's public knowledge. So I am in the middle of international relocation. There is plenty of bureaucracy. There is the house in Italy that needs to be set up again to support human life, because it has been has not been inhabited for a very long time. And plus I have the necessity of keep producing content, keep speaking with you, because A, it is addictive. I can't really stay without you. B, yeah, I need to pay the bills. But the problem is that it takes quite a long time to do the documentary, the videos in the documentary format that you mostly like. There's a clear preference for these short documentaries that I normally do, but I have very little time of doing that. Videos like that may take up to 50 hours to prepare, while a live stream, it is still quite nice. I can still speak with you guys, and well, it is easier to do because there's no production. Production is way simpler. So I just need to do the research. And that's exactly what I did tonight for the events that are happening in the Middle East. This is a terrible conflict, and the events are still unfolding. So all the news, everything that I'm saying is not as cast in stone, as set in stone as it could be, or as I would like it to be, because I don't like to go with too many conjectures. But the events are still unfolding, so the things are what they are, if we want to discuss this. I will focus on more on technical and operational aspects. I'm not talking about politics, geopolitics, and international law and or these kind of things. Because we are, I'm not the best person, I'm not the most qualified person to speak about these issues. Second, this is a very polarizing issue, so I don't want to end up into the usual mess with the comments and so on. So in this case, we will try to stay as matter of fact as possible, and the analysis will focus on the technical and operational aspects. And the most important part of this live stream is the final part, where we will discuss some initial, because, well, they are initial and they're temporary and they are what they are, but we will discuss the lessons learned, because beyond the conflict itself, it is extremely important for us to understand the impact of this, to understand what could be the impact of what is happening here in other conflicts. So we have this dynamic interaction of different weapons, different systems, of different doctrines, military doctrines, different situations. What can this tell us about what could happen somewhere else, probably in larger scale conflagrations? And I think this is the main point of view, the lens through which we should look at this conflict. So we will have 4 parts. I will go briefly to the events so far. I will quickly speak about the Israeli Air Force attack. Then we will cover the reply that the Iranians are continuously doing. There are probably missiles raining over Israel right now as we speak. And then we will discuss the lessons learned. As I said, it is the most important part. I added some pictures and some videos to this presentation. Let's try to watch them together. I tried also to use pictures that are not that common, that you don't see every time, that are not taken by everybody else. And so this, yes, it's true, I forgot to put the slides on, but yeah. As I told you, as I said before, I'm very thin on the ground, getting organized to be better. And so I said the most important part is the lessons learned. I will try to show some pictures, some videos that are not the most common, just so this may be more interesting. So yes, this was a very long introduction. There are 176 people connected, which is plenty of people. And let's get straight into it. Mind, while I am talking, I can't watch the chat, but I will do some pauses to try to see what it is there. But mind, most of your comments while I am presenting will go unnoticed, and the same is true for the super chats. I don't want to be rude and not thank you. All those people who give me we're going to help me specifically. It is just that it is virtually impossible to keep an eye on both. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on. So a bit of background. So there's no need to remind you that there is a long story of confrontation between Israel and the Arabs and and in general the Muslim world. And Iran is part of this Muslim world since the Iranian Revolution in 1973. The Iran is some people call it theocracy. I wouldn't say it is exactly that, but it's still a country where the religious authority is extremely important. So and that generally aligned with the rest of the Arab world against Israel. The confrontation is very long, goes back decades. There was a constant slow burning conflict with the Iranian proxies that operated in Lebanon and Syria, the so-called Hezbollah movement, and so on. There have been plenty of terrorist acts, bilateral attacks, and so on. But not to go too far back, the modern stage of this situation may be considered to start when Israel attacked with precision-guided weapons the Iranian consulate in Syria in April 2024 to kill some high Iranian officials, and the attack was successful. The level of tension sort of rose and rose and rose till now. There have been two stages of a hot war, the so-called True Promise operation, in which Iran, in retaliating against Israel and retaliating for the attack to the Iranian consulate, launched ballistic missiles and drones toward Israel. It was in April 2024, and it happened again in October 2024. And now we have something different. So now we have the Operation Rising Lion, in which Israel has decided to attack Iran. And according to the Israeli leadership, this is all in. So they started with a decapitation strike on the Iranian leadership, and we'll see they had some level of success. Netanyahu appealed directly to the Iranian people to overthrow their government, and it is considered a regime change operation. That's one of the purposes, one of the objectives of Israel. It's one of the targets that are subtending the decision of taking this attack. The other important objective is the stopping of the Iranian nuclear program, which was progressing. I mean, it was most likely Iran didn't want to build a nuclear weapon, but they wanted to be in the position of building one very quickly if the situation became somehow complex and required them to do something like this. Something a bit similar of what India did for a very long time. But they were enriching uranium well beyond any civilian necessity, and but they still have some reticence to move toward a full nuclear program, and which, by the way, and this is a reticence that is completely gone now. The Iranian parliament, because there is one, actually voted the withdrawal from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So they are reserving themselves to actually execute a nuclear program and to produce it. a nuclear weapon. Together with these main objectives, there are some others, which one is to reduce the long-range Iranian capability and their military high-end capabilities, and also reduce the Iranian industrial capability that you may think, particularly those who don't follow this thing, you may think that Iran is a typical Middle East country where that is quite poor and so on, but actually it is not true. It's a country that is relatively industrialized, and economically speaking is better than other countries in the Middle East. It's very different from the Arab countries. The Iranians are not Arabs, but that's a different story, will take us quite far. So finally, the Israel Air Force is planning a 2 weeks campaign, in their own words, which should give them the possibility of hitting a number of targets to reach these objectives. And they believe that 2 weeks will be enough. Wow, 231 people connected. That's incredible. Thank you very much for being here. So the Israel Air Force started the attack at the beginning, and this is a video of smoke over Tehran in the first days. And as you can see, it's day. They started hitting at night, but they're operating during the day. And this is a 747 hit at Mashhad. So obviously the Iranians didn't sit down. The first reply was a launch of Shahed drones, but this wasn't the Iranians. This was some proxies in Iraq. Then they replied with a massive ballistic attack on Israel, on commands, anti-ballistic defenses, their bases, and general infrastructures. Apparently, Dimona, which is the nuclear center for Israel, because Israel has nuclear weapons, they don't admit it, but everybody knows. Apparently it was attacked, probably wasn't damaged, but it was attacked. And there are other scientific institutions being attacked. So far, the Iranian retaliation has been mostly relying on ballistic missiles. Drones and cruise missiles are almost absent. There was some, but it is almost absent. The operation started with a big Kirsch-Bin Iranian attack at the beginning. Sorry, big Israeli attack at the beginning that penetrated in Iraq and did some damage. A big Iranian retaliation with ballistic missiles, but it keeps going day and night with smaller operation. Apparently, the Israeli are going through a list of targets of different nature that they want to hit, while the Iranians are now focusing on the energy, oil and petroleum and oil installation and port infrastructure. They hit Haifa very heavily, and that's the main port where most of the import and export in and out of Israel go through. And quite interesting, Iran has declared that they will stop if the Israeli stops. So there is still, at least from the Iranian side, the will of limiting the escalations of things. So Israel Air Force's losses. So the Israel Air Force declares no losses, while the Iranians allege the downing of 1 to 3 F-35s and 1 F-16, and also allege the capture of a female pilot. There are also rumors of further Israel Air Force losses. The Iranians shot down probably 2 drones at this stage, but no aircraft. I'm saying no aircraft because there is no convincing visual proof so far. I don't want to insult your intelligence with the pictures that have been published in the social media that you see on the right. That should be proof that the Israeli aircraft have been shot down, and I think they're quite funny, and I think that artificial intelligence went definitely overboard. But so it's quite likely that the Israeli aircraft have been shot at. Probably it's quite likely that they have been engaged and maybe damaged, but so far we have none of them shot down. What was the damage that was inflicted to Iran? The Israeli attacked more than 100 targets, military and civilian. I say civilian because they target individuals, and particularly nuclear scientists in their homes. It is very likely, and we'll see this in more detail later, that there's been done significant damage to the Iranian ground-based air defenses systems. The Iranians have plenty of air defense systems because they were planning for this, but still it seems that they receive a pretty bad damage. Several air bases of the Iranian Air Force have been hit, but the Iranian Air Force is not engaging. They're retired in the south and the east of the country, which is out of range of the Israelis, and they are sitting there trying to weather the storm. And they're not engaging, and the reason is probably very easy. I mean, the Iranian Air Force is excellent in terms of training and in terms of human material quality. This is inherited by the time of the Shah. They really consider themselves elite, but they fly, let's say, a fleet of historical aircraft. They still fly F-14s, they still fly F-4s, they still fly F-5s. They have some more modern aircraft of Russian origin, but still it is not a match for the Israelis. If the Iranians wanted to, let's say, openly fight against the Israelis, they may have some lucky shots, and training does a lot, but Israelis are well trained as well, but they will be destroyed. They will be probably wiped out by the Israelis. So what they did is absolutely understandable. The Israelis also attacked, obviously, the nuclear facilities, but the damage to them seems light, even because these are very deep underground and protected by very strong concrete. The Iranians actually developed particular concrete exactly to defeat the bunker penetrators. So that's very difficult to hit. Also, the ballistic missiles production plants and the depot have been hit. There have been some attack on the oil infrastructure. Curiously, I haven't seen anything happening on Kark Island. But this is, which is the main oil terminal in the Gulf for Iran. But there have been hits on refineries, depots, and so on. We can watch together these videos in which we see that the Iranians are operating with AAAs. I have yet to see the Iranian air defenses launch a missile, which means that either they can't or they don't have that many targets because the Israelis are using standoff weapons. Oops. Another quite interesting picture, this time from the Israeli side, is this pictures that shows the destruction of two F-14s. This could be a drone or could be the T-pod of an aircraft orbiting the airbase, and this would be, and if it was an aircraft, this would be a sure sign that the Iranian air defenses are completely destroyed, but this is probably a drone, to be honest. Even these F-14s seem to me to be not in service, but that's even if you look at the surroundings and so on. But that's quite curious. And yes, no, the Tomcats, yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. Okay, this is another situation in Tehran. This is the Iranian state TV, which is a civilian target, but TV is the target. When these operations happen, the TV headquarters are one of the targets that always get attacked, because it's tantamount as attacking the communication and severing the link between the government and the people, and at least to a large extent. So that's what happens. These are the damages, though, are not exclusive to Tehran. The Iranian reply, the Iranian reprisal, has made damage as well. And this is Tel Aviv, obviously. The Israeli government either denies or doesn't comment about damage on military infrastructure. There has bin heavy collateral damage in Tel Aviv, and maybe in the Tel Aviv area in general. We'll see why. As I said, Dimona, the nuclear center, was attacked, but apart from that, we learned nothing, in the sense that we don't know if it was any damage or anything. The Israeli government has now prohibited all the journalists and news organizations to work in Haifa, because the port and most of all the energy power generation, the power station, the Haifa power station that powers a large part of Israel, has been hit and has been basically destroyed. Some observers have counted up to 20 impacts in the area. This has strategic implication because, as I said, the port of Haifa is the main port in Israel. Most of the imports go through Haifa. If the port is not working, is a serious problem for Israel. And again, the Haifa refinery and power station provide the fuel and power to Israel to a large extent, cover large areas. So these are the Iranian are inflicting damage, are definitely inflicting damage. It's not a demonstration this time. They are inflicting damage. Quite interesting is the involvement of other countries that is always discussed in a low key in the mainstream media. So in Israel, there is a THAAD battery, that the Israelis asked as a complement for their own defense system. It's an American unit, and it has operated. It has operated. 2 American destroyers are now steaming, right off the coast of Israel, because the Arleigh Burke destroyers may have SM-3 missiles, and these are anti-ballistic weapons, quite effective, to be honest. Not very many available, but quite effective. And apparently a stage of an SM-3 has been recovered on the ground, so they operated. There are rumors, but not confirmation, that US and UK are providing tanker support. And there have been other rumors that Rafa Crotiri which is the British base on Cyprus. Rafa Crotiri actually hosted some of the Israeli aircraft for refueling and dispersion. Again, rumors, we can confirm them. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the case, to be honest. The guys on the Discord server managed to find a German A400, which is a transport aircraft flying over Jordan in the middle of all this, which is not clear what they were doing there. And it is also possible that RAF Typhoons are patterning for drones over Jordan and Saudi Arabia. We will speak a little bit about that. Okay, this is an actual picture of the THAAD that has been deployed, the THAAD launcher that has been deployed in Israel. Okay, this closes the first part where we spoke about the events, and then we need to speak about the attack. I do a small pause, and then maybe take some questions. Thank you, Happiness Consultant. Why? Where is it? So, why were the innocent F-14s targeted? They were hitting no one. I actually share your grief, to be honest. I share your pain. 403 people, that's a lot of people. Okay. Awakening, there's a lot of stupid in the chat. Tomcats, problematic post. Brits are just ready to jump in anywhere, so Keane Starmer the jackass. Okay. Not very nice, but it's unfortunately true. Most of Iranian missiles are in silos underground. Actually, no. In a bit, they make use of transporter erection launches systematically, but the missiles are kept underground. Okay. Iran will be the downfall of the United States. That's not easy if they want to go all in. Are a meaningful number of Iranian missiles able to even be raised to firing position before the IDF targets them? Absolutely. They are very difficult targets. They are very difficult targets. Absolutely. Okay, there's some. He's in the bunker. This is bad. Or he had a quarrel with his wife again. Meloni kind of girl, bad quarrels. So I am divorced. So luckily I don't have to quarrel with anyone. It's not, as I said, this is not a bunker, it's a basement. And I'm here because everywhere else the temperature is above 30. So yeah, that's what you get, guys. I'm trying to become a bit more organized for the next time. But yeah, we'll see. I will try to live stream from now on. I will try to live stream a couple of times a week, while I will still produce some videos, but there won't be many. Okay, let's move on to discussing the Israel Air Force attack. So the first question that we have, how many aircraft the Israeli used? Oh, sorry, just let me drink a second. This is not sponsored, this is just orange. Okay. How many aircraft they used? They declared of having been used, they have said they used 200 aircraft in 5 ways the first day. So if you consider that the Israel Air Force lineup is the one you see there with 65 F-15s of various versions, 170 F-16 and 45 F-35I, you can see that it is a lot of, it is quite a large percentage of what they have available. It's basically 63% of what they have. If you consider that the average availability of an Air Force that is kept in good order, and probably the Israelis had time to do some extra maintenance before the attack could be in around 75-80%. You see that 63 means almost 60% means almost everything they had. If there is proof or a confirmation that the Israelis are all in, this is probably the most poignant. This is 60%. They used everything they could. They threw at this operation almost everything they could. And on the right, you can see as map, you see that from Israel to Tehran, there are 1,500 kilometers, 1,600 kilometers, depending on how you measure them, as the crow flies. But Jordan and Saudi Arabia actually denied their airspace for the operation. So the Israelis always fly through Syria and Iraq. And then they get to Iran. So the Israeli Air Force has produced a very interesting and very cool video. As you can see, according to them, these are images of the actual operation. These are aircraft preparing for the operation. This F-15 is quite interesting. Please note here that they are using conventional JDAMs, that is weapons with no wings, and the AMRAAM, the variant of the AMRAAM that they have is the D variant. You can tell from the wings of the missile. And the fact that they're using these JDAMs means that the that they were capable of getting quite close to the targets, because these are not gliding weapons. They have a certain standoff range, but we are talking, depending, 20, 25 kilometers tops, depending on the speed and the altitude of release. Now, notice this F-16 here, which is coming back with still one JDAM attacked. So probably this means that probably one target was not hit. But anyway, this is the Israeli Air Force has published this, and it was quite interesting. So the Israeli Air Force had a list of about 100 targets, and they're systematically going through the tasks of hitting them. One of their targets was the Iranian military leadership, and so far, if we counted correctly, there are about 8 general level officers killed. The other target were the atomic scientists. That is, mind, these are civilians, so this is a civilian target, and 14 of them have been killed. Then they attack nuclear installation, ballistic missile factories, the ground-based air defenses, they attacked air bases, they attack oil and petroleum infrastructure. On the right, you see the Bazan oil refineries, and you can see that the cooling tower in the one just behind the one in front has been decapitated completely. There's nothing there. And also attacks the military industrial complex, let's say like this, that existed in Iran. Obviously, the main target were the nuclear installations. This is a map of the main installations that they have. As you can see, there is plenty of infrastructure, plenty of target connected to the nuclear development that need to be attacked. One thing that I didn't know is that there are actually uranium mines within Iran, so they are autonomous when it comes to producing the raw materials for doing the activity. So this is fun. This is before and after. As you can see, there are a number of hits here, and also here. There are differences and so on, but the damage overall is quite light. And most of these infrastructures are underground, and they are protected underground, and they have these this very hard concrete coverage that makes them very difficult target. This is Iraq, another, as you can see here, the reactor here. Nothing happened here, not attacked. This is Fordow, which is a uranium enrichment site, probably the most important one. It seems basically intact. We know that it has been attacked, but I can't see any sign of damage. And mind, this is the site where the Iranians have dug hundreds of meters, about more than 100 meters underground. So this is very difficult to hit, and we should require many penetrators hitting each one in the hole produced by the first, just to get there to the separation turbines. and which are, I mean, the critical component for the uranium enrichment. "442 people. Thank you very much. Let's keep going. This is Natanz, another base. This one shows damage, as you can see. There's a lot of damage, but it seems to be rather superficial overall. It's not been completely destroyed, and this shows how we already talked about this when we talked about China's missile capability and how this would play out attacking an airbase, for example. But this is a general thing. When you have these large complexes, with precision weapons, you can target a specific building, a specific thing, but the overall complex is a very difficult target. You would need a lot of hits to really put it out of commission, definitely, in a permanent way. And so, I mean, there are obviously buildings and targets that are more important than others, and your intelligence is good enough, you can hit those, but it's still very difficult to put a large compound out of order, out of work. And another thing that the Israelis have shown is that their intelligence is extremely good, but not infallible. And in fact, here we have a video of them hitting a decoy. This is probably an empty truck that looks like one of the trucks that the Iranians use to transport and launch the ballistic missiles, but you can see in the explosion that it is basically just empty. There's nothing inside. So this is most likely a decoy. So this is a video from the Israeli Air Force that shows how they attacked an underground missile facility in Iran. The Iranians have built several of these installations, their weapons capability as well. And this is one of the key lessons that have been learned from situations like Operation Desert Storm or operations like that happened in Yugoslavia. You need to harden your forces, you need to harden your main weapons, or you need to disperse them, because otherwise they will be hit by an opponent that has the air superiority. There's also a defensive component, a defensive posture in the operation of the Israel Air Force, because the Iranians can still launch drones or cruise missiles. So some level of defense is actually necessary. As I said at the beginning, some Iranian proxies attacked and launched Shaheds. Now it seems that the Iranians, there have been a few pictures of that the Iranians are using some drones, but it is a very they're in a very limited number. There are not massive attacks. These are probably, to be completely honest, I believe that they're doing this just to keep the combat air patrols, the Israeli combat air patrols, on air, and in this way, create force the machines to become it's going to wear down the machines after I mean, a number of hours, some extra additional maintenance is always needed. So they probably want to just keep the Israeli flying while and have some aircraft that and keep some aircraft in a position that such that it can be used to attack Iran. And in the medium and long term is going to reduce the availability of the aircraft. To fly these combat drones, Jordan and Saudi Arabia have allowed the Israeli to use their territory, which is quite curious. They're not allowed to attack, but they can defend. We don't know if the Jordans are actively participating to the defense, but as I was mentioning before, we have from Flight Radar 24 has been a British tanker and 2 Typhoons have been spotted at a point coming back from the area. So it is definitely possible that the RAF may have helped in this defensive mission. A few words about the F-35, because this is the largest combat use of the F-35 so far in history. We have seen them flying in stealth configuration, so without the Lunenburg lenses, so they operated like stealth. According to the Israelis, they flew suppression air defenses and electronic warfare missions. And there is a rumor that they had been modified to fly non-stop to Tehran with no air refueling. So this is a rumor. It is absolutely possible that some additional stealthy fuel tanks have been designed in Israel. We have no pictures, but it is possible. Not terribly difficult, to be honest, to do. But I don't think that this is the case. I think that the F-35 basically has a range that is much longer, combat range that is much longer than is officially recognized. I mean, the usual number that is thrown around is 1,200 kilometers or 1,300 kilometers, which is quite a long range, with just internal fuel. I have reason to think it is more. There are some witnesses that make me think in other contexts, not in these operations, that made me think that the combat range of the F-35 is actually longer. And it is possible that the Israelis either built some stealth few additional fuel tanks, or maybe sacrificed one of the internal bays for fuel. Whatever the reason is, these aircraft are flying freely over Tehran using precision weapons, and we don't have a single picture of an Iranian missile trying to engage them. This is quite important because it is showing that the stealthiness of this aircraft is actually very effective, or better. I personally believe it is a combination of stealth and electronic warfare capability, because it's not well known, but the F-35 has its own electronic warfare capability that is not far from that of a dedicated platform. So a combination of the two is probably such that the F-35 can operate in contested airspace, which is the Iran. I considering the density of the Iranian air defenses, it is likely that they have been that they tried to engage them, but so far with no success. And the precision that they can have is that they can show is really astounding. This is a photograph that pretty much went around the world. This is probably an SDB, maybe with a reduced warhead. And that apartment that has been hit there is the apartment of one of the nuclear scientists. And as you can see, they got it exactly right. As I said, probably there was a smaller explosive charge than the average SDB, because otherwise it would have made more damage. But this level of accuracy is really, really otherworldly. It's really incredible. So in terms of weapons being used for the attack, there are a lot of precision-guided munitions. The Israelis have seen with operating with the JDAMs, their typical version, and the small diameter bombs. These are well-known weapons for those who follow these things, are passionate about these things, and but while none of them are particularly important standoff weapons, so they don't have a very long standoff range. So this means that they trusted the possibility of getting close to the target. So they trusted the fact that the ground-based air defenses were not effective. But we also know that they are using the Israeli aeroballistic missiles. In fact, Israel has developed during the years a type of weapon that is not that common in the West, which is a number of aeroballistic missiles. These are missiles, so they are like short-range, the short-range ballistic missiles, which are actually air-launched and not ground-launched. While the LoRa, the one below that you see under the F-16, also has a ground-launched and a sea-launched variant. But otherwise, but in this case, obviously, there's also an air-launched variant. These are not very common in the West, but they turn out to be extremely, according to the reports we have, very accurate. They have ranges that vary between 200, maximum ranges vary between 200 400 kilometers. So, and the fourth-generation aircraft penetrating in the Iranian airspace don't have to go very far before firing if it is armed with these weapons. It is something that is not discussed in the mainstream media is the logistics of this attack. So the entry routes are over Syria and Iraq, as we said before. And by the way, Iraq is not terribly friendly. Apparently, some AAAs from Iraq engaged some Israeli drones that were doing either bomb damage assessment or attacking something. So the Iraqis are not particularly friendly. Anyway, they go into this area. They refuel. They tank. They do tanking over Syria, and because now they can. Syria is no longer is basically no longer an enemy. So they can't do anything. So and it's a relatively safe airspace. But Israel has just 14 tankers. So the number of tankers, 14 is in total, which means that you can use probably 10, 12 in the best case. So the Israelis are that number of aircraft limits the size of the attacking package. That's probably the reason why, rather than using 200 aircraft all at the same time in one big package, in one big attack, in the first they executed 5 waves in the first day. So this means that even if the F-35s don't need to refuel, all the other aircraft do. So they can probably and by the way, there is also the control capability limits the size of as well. So having 200 aircraft on air and coordinating all of them is a big task. I mean, the operations that we have seen that we have seen in between India and Pakistan, the operation done by the Pakistani, you have 100 aircraft very quickly on air, all operating in a coordinated manner, contracting the targets, allocating and contracting the targets quickly. It was an outstanding operation. So it's very difficult. The operational package, the big operational package that we see at Red Flag are 40, 50 aircraft, 60 aircraft, and those are large. In an actual war scenario like this, you can probably reasonably operate 20, 30 aircraft at the same time. All these type of operations called COMAO, combined air operations, but there is a limit, and the tankers and the control capability are probably limiting the number of aircraft that the Israeli can dedicate to the attack mission at any given time. A big question is the sustainment capability, because as it seems now, the Israeli can fly within the Iranian airspace, and they're hitting targets. The point is, how many weapons do they have? We know that when the Gaza situation happened, the Israeli had to ask for urgent delivery of JDAMs, for example, from the United and other weapons, other components from the United States, because the consumption of these intelligent weapons was quite high. We don't know if they spent these months and years piling up weapons so they can go on for a very long time, or they are actually depleting quite quickly their arsenals. It's a big question mark. Apparently, they are sure that they can go on for 2 weeks and presumably have enough for any other contingency after that. We need to see, because mind that it's fine for the planning, but is posing a constraint in case to have to re-attack again one of the targets, which is absolutely normal. If you don't do damage, you try again. But I'm not sure that the Israeli can really sustain this operation indefinitely without the American help. We'll see. An extremely important component of this operation was cyber and commandos and Mossad operations. So there was at the beginning of operation of cyber attack against the Iranian comms, which worked very well, and the Iranian integrated air defenses stayed offline for 8 hours. It took 8 hours to restart the system, which is quite a long time, and it is quite a success. The problem with cyber attacks is that they are just one shot when you know the vector of of attack, generally you can patch it quite quickly. So probably it's not going to be repeated anytime soon. Probably the Israeli needs to find a different attack vector. There has been a repetition of what we have seen in Russia a couple of weeks ago, where the Ukrainians used civilian trucks to launch drones, small drones, from nearby a military base to attack a Russian Air Force base, to attack the aircraft on that base. And apparently the Mossad did exactly the same. It was a covert operation that was very successful. Also, the Mossad, which, by the way, I didn't say that, but I'm giving for granted that you know that is the Israeli Secret Service. They also conducted conventional operation, for example, with improvised explosive devices, cars with the bomb inside, to actually hit again either senior leaders or scientists or other people that are in any way, shape, or form important for the Iranian government and the Iranian military capability. They also did a quite spectacular operation in which they infiltrated, probably with stealth helicopter that we know that they have, at least in small numbers. They infiltrated the commandos, and they used spike missiles to attack the Iranian ground-based air defenses. The numbers that is floating around, that 40 units of equipment were destroyed with these methods. They could be radars, which is bad. Could be launchers, which is bad. Or could be radars, which is worse. Or could be command center, which is worse again, which is even worse, because in this case you actually risk because in this case you would eliminate also the people that are trained to work on these systems. And there is a big question mark, that is, what was the contribution of this style of attack against the Iranian ground-based air defensive versus the classic suppression and destruction of air defenses missions conducted most likely by the F-35s, because that's what is in the Western doctrine. So it would be very surprised if anything else would have happened. And so it seems that the F-35 are actually doing very well, and they actually worked as expected. The problem is we don't know. We don't know exactly how much their life were made easier by this kind of attack, and that's a big question. And it's a question that I have, because I know that the Iranians invested a lot in their air defenses. So it's very, very strange that everything went offline like this, and they're not engaging anything. I had a conversation with some friends, and they say, well, maybe the F-35s are flying to Tehran and they're attacking some specific targets, but the other Israeli aircraft actually managed to enter the Iranian airspace in the first night, but after that, they're using standoff weapons. They're using the aeroballistic missiles from a distance. So if they enter in the contested airspace, they're not entering very long. So the Iranian air defenses have very few targets. Yeah, but okay, then move the air defenses forward. Okay, just try to intercept them, to deny and contest the airspace over Iraq, for example, for a little bit. So it's very strange to what has happened. I thought at the beginning, thinking to a similar operation, I always thought that the Israelis could do an operation like this, but not do serious damage to the Iranians, not at the scale that they seem to have done, but we are not sure that they really have done damage, because it could be these cyber and commandos operations that made the bulk of the damage, or it could be that the Iranians are simply hiding their capabilities because they don't want to risk. And by the way, there is in Tehran, there are still explosions going on. There are plenty of Mossad cells, Mossad units still operating and doing classical terror operations in the area. And so this is, we already talked about this. The Iranians have a large arsenal, and they were definitely caught by surprise. Some key radars have been hit, so there is, for a while, at least for a while, their airspace was open. As I said, there are no pictures of missiles being launched against aircraft, which is very strange. Someone should have seen them. And yeah, the Iranians claim that they hit some aircraft, but they probably didn't. If it was true, we would have seen the pictures immediately. As I said, it looks strange because the Iranians have some pretty modern home-developed system. This is the Bavar, which is considered the main one, which is considered a modern, effective system. They also have electronic warfare capability. For example, there are problems with the GPS in the Gulf, because they're probably trying to spoof the GPS-guided weapons like the Russians did in Ukraine and so on. So the fact that the Iranian air defenses are not operating seems very strange to me. When it comes to the Iranian Air Force, well, the Iranian Air Force is almost absent. As I said, most of its forces have been retired to the east and south of the country. The Iranians did literally miracles to keep their aircraft flying, to keep their F-4s and F-14s flying. They also modernized them to some extent, but despite all the efforts, it's an obsolete force. They don't have real options against Israel, the IDF. There have been some sightings of F-4s that were patrolling in mostly anti-drone function, but it doesn't seem that they ever engage any Israeli aircraft. There are no news of losses apart of those F-14s that you've seen before, and potentially a tanker or a transport. But I mean, they're still there. They can't do much, definitely, but they are still there. So I think that the Iranian Air Force is out of the equation. Some of the people I normally discuss with think otherwise, but that's the impression that I have. And this concludes the second part, and we have already been streaming for more than an hour. I thought it was going to be long, but not this long. And so let's have a short pause. Then I will. So let's have a read of the chat. A quick read of the chat, and a short pause, and then we start with part 3, the Iranian reply. So. We are hanging on your lips, Millennium 7. It's heavy, it's very heavy. Let go, please. Yeah, in a minute. So Yemen successfully targeted F-13s. Iran is having problems. I don't know what to tell you, to be honest. It's very strange. There's something that I am pretty sure that there is something that we don't know, we don't understand. I mean, as I said, the Israeli had the possibility of winning this kind of battle, but I thought it was going to be much harder. So it's quite strange. Do you think that Iran would be able to neutralize the Israeli aircraft before they run out of missiles? So who's running out of missiles? And because at the moment they seem that they are not even trying to engage them. So it's most likely that the Israeli will run out of missiles before the Iranian do anything. And since the Iranian is not launching missiles, I don't know what is going to happen. Okay. Odds of regime change in Iran without US boots on the ground. So, okay, this is not terribly, this is not strictly my area, but from what I know, the chance of a regime change in Iran are pretty much zero. Because there is a very disorganized opposition, so-called democratic opposition, but the Iranian government structure is very strange. There is a mix of religious authorities, election. It's very complex. But anyway, there is a very disorganized opposition that has not a lot of follow. The Iranians are not particularly keen on the religious government, but they are not also really averse. There have been so the protests, the manifestation. I mean the students protesting against the government or citizens protesting against the government that happened a few years ago have been really blown out of proportion by the Western media. They were not that big, so the government is not that in a bad situation. It's not that the Iranians want to get rid of them. And now that the same people that tell them to revolt are pretty much shooting at them, I don't think there is any real possibility, but not even in the case there are American boots on the ground. Because it's true, you can damage the Iranian infrastructure and create damage quite a lot, but don't think about invading the country. That would be impossible. It would be Ukraine 2.0. Okay, small break, and then we start again. Let me drink something. Okay, now let's start with the Iranian reply, which is this time very different from the operations that they did in 2024, the True Promise 1 and 2. This one is called True Promise 3, and this time they want to make damage. The previous ones were mostly demonstrations. This time they want to make damage. So Iran has the capability of replying with drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles, because we said the Air Force is out of discussion. So far, they used almost only ballistic missiles. There is no discussion of cruise missiles. There are just a few drones have been used. As I said, it's probably mostly a way of keeping the Israelis busy with some form of defense, but the real damage is done by the ballistic missiles. And here we have an example of how it looks from afar. Now, here you can see how it looks in the sense, the targets that have the re-entry vehicles that show a tail, those are either decoys or damaged re-entry vehicles which have maybe been hit by the Israeli defense systems. The others are actual missiles. This is, as you can see, they fly all at the same speed in this case, and yeah, there's plenty of them. There are plenty of them, and at a relatively low altitude. Spectacular picture, a spectacular video is this one, where we can see the Iranian missiles launch from an airliner, and with the right light conditions, it's probably either sunset or dawn. That plume that you see there is the separation between the first and the second stage. Then there are others that just stop, and there are some contrails that just stop, and this means that the missile is a single stage. When you see the plume that keeps going, then it means that it's a two-stage missile. The longest range and most recent Iranian ballistic missiles are actually two stages, and it is, as you can see, is spectacular, albeit it's a war thing. And as you can see that overall the salvos are relatively compact. They're not terribly separated. So they are launching their weapons all together. Really, here you see an exoatmospheric interception. I mean, here, this is probably an exoatmospheric hit by one of the defense systems. So, studying the Iranian missile capabilities is a daunting task. The estimations of the Iranian ballistic missile vary from 3,000 to 20,000. The one that seems most likely to me is close to 10,000, but only a fraction of these missiles can actually reach Israel. Others have a shorter range. There is a forest of models and types. There are some very old, some very new, some are Scud derivatives, so systems that go back to the 50s, the 60s, at least if not in construction, in design. But on the flip side, there are some very capable, very modern systems. So there is a core of modern weapons that are capable of flying fast trajectories. In the mainstream media, they're often called hypersonic because they hit the ground very quickly. We will see some examples before. They have the decoys that are quite important for to give some extra target to the ballistic missile defense. And they have MARVs, which a MARV is a re-entry vehicle, a warhead that is capable of maneuvering while re-entering the atmosphere, or just in the high layer of the atmosphere, which makes very difficult to intercept, extremely difficult to intercept. If they maneuver inside the atmosphere, they tend to slow down quite a lot, so they might become an easier target. But if they maneuver in the high atmosphere or in space, they become very, very difficult to hit. This is the Institute for the Study of War. It's sort of showing some of the types actually available, but there is more. There is more. They have an infinite list of variants and that is capable. And as you can see, the most moderns are two-stage weapons. Okay. You can see here the EMAD. You see that it has some small wings, small tiny wings here. This means that this is a MARV. As I said, the Iranian ballistic force has been attacked. They hit the, as we saw before, the storage site, the underground launch sites, but also they tried to hit the mobile launchers, but they hit plenty of decoys, so probably that part didn't do much damage. The salvo size that we've seen now is between 50 and 150. The first salvo on the 13th, the night after the Israeli attack, was about 150 missiles. And then they keep launching every night 40, 50, 60, 70 missiles, attacking some specific targets. And in fact, they launch a few hundred. It's difficult to say how many exactly, but at this stage, the Iranians launch a few hundred. You have to consider, one may say, well, why don't do a full saturation attack that so overwhelms the Israeli ballistic defense, that depletes all their intersectors, and then the rest is easy. The problem is that the number of transport that tells the transporter to launch is limited, and they need to be reloaded. So there is a maximum size of the salvo that can be launched, and probably we haven't seen the maximum that they are capable of, but it's not 1,000. It's probably in the hundreds. Okay. How is doing the Israeli anti-ballistic defensive system? By the way, it is often called the Iron Dome, but it is not the Iron Dome. It is not the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is a different thing. It is a short-range system that is built to defend against the very short-range artillery rockets, very short-range let's say improvised missiles like the Palestinians from Gaza used, can engage drones, small drones at low altitude. It is very efficient while doing so, but that's no capabilities against a real ballistic missile. The others, that's the Iron Dome. The system that Israel has used are the Arrow 3, the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3, that are probably the most effective system. The David Sling, that has some point defense capabilities against ballistic missiles. There are the Americans with THAAD. There are some Patriot batteries, and so on. But this is it. So, what is the interception rate? So the Israeli have declared that they hit 96% of the targets, which seems quite a lot, to be honest. Some other estimates say that the capability is that the interception rate is 75%, which is still pretty good, to be honest, but is very different from 96. Even from an operational perspective, it's different between the occasional missile going through and a good chunk of a salvo actually hitting the target, 96 to 75. However, this rate is probably reducing, so seems to be reducing. For example, with a relatively small salvo, the Iranians were able to hit Haifa with several hits. So it seems that they are becoming progressively less effective. This could be the result of the fact that the Iranians using the older weapons, those that are not very accurate, that are not very high-end weapons, to basically do some damage if they can, but principally to deplete the number of interceptors, to force the Israelis use the interceptor. We see in some videos how many interceptors they launch at all times. So again, this is another logistic problem. That's just problem that needs to be addressed. How many interceptors do they have? One would think that they said 2 weeks. If they said 2 weeks, they think they have enough for 2 weeks, but it remains to be seen. This stuff is very expensive, very complex, very expensive. So then is never built in very large numbers. So let's wait and see. What we have seen also, some hypersonic MARVs go through. They look different. They look much faster than other missiles because they fly a different trajectory, a higher trajectory that is also faster. And probably there have been a couple of cases where the launchers were actually hit. So it seems that the Iranians attacked the launchers, and in a couple of cases they hit them. This is one. And by the way, this is Tel Aviv. This is in the middle, in the central area, in the middle of residential areas, offices, and so on. Actually having, I think it's a Patriot or something like that, just in the middle of that logistic stuff. And here you see that it pretty much hit very close to the battery. So this probably is reasonable to expect that it was has been at least damaged and so on. There are plenty of this video appeared plenty of times on the internet, has been very shared a lot, and there are different angles of this hit that are really impressive. This one is showing this one is showing the Arrow batteries that defend Haifa, trying to intercept the attacking missile. You have seen that they launch plenty of interceptors, and bam, there it is. You see the one in the right, this one in the right, hit very close to the launch point, and here you see some secondary explosions, which probably means that some missiles have been destroyed. So this is probably a hit on one of the defensive launchers. This one is another potential hit. This one is probably hypersonic, as you see, because it was very quick. It's not very clear, but you see that there's the smoke column, the smoke trails, and bang, the missile goes through the smoke trail and hits the launcher. So there may be some cases of launchers have been hit. And by the way, this is showing that the Iranians do have some quite accurate weapons in there. They're available to them. So, okay. Obviously, the Israelis are intercepting quite a lot of targets, and here you see some interceptions going on. As I said, those there we go. These are all interceptions, and as we were discussing before, you see the targets that show a tail are probably either debris, so something that has been intercepted out of the atmosphere, or just decoys, or potentially a missile that broke during the re-enter, because sometimes it happens, particularly with the old ones that the Iranians have. But as I said, it's still good to become a target and attract a couple of interceptors. In this video, again, we see some interceptions. As you can see, the Israeli interceptors are capable of doing some rather impressive maneuvers. For example, look at this one. Yeah, turns, intercept. So they're very capable. As long as the engine is burning, the missile still has the kinematic capability and the energy to pull out these maneuvers. That's not the problem. The main problem is having a guidance software that is capable of managing this type of stunts. We have seen with the Iron Dome, which is not used in this case, but with the Iron Dome, so the concept is probably existing in the Israeli doctrine. We see with the Iron Dome the capability of reallocating missiles. So missiles that were originally launched against a target was hit by another missile, then the second missile was reallocated to another target, which is a very efficient way of using the weapons. I have no reason to believe that this is not implemented in the other ABM systems. And so what are the targets that the Iranian attacked? Well, the first target was the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv, which was also the cause of plenty of collateral damage, because it was attacked with the poor precision, poor accuracy, poor precision missiles, with missiles poor precision at the very beginning. So a number of them ended up out 100, 200 meters out of the target, and this caused a lot of damage to the civilian residential areas, which was quite impressive. As we said, we know that Dimona was attacked. We don't know what happened there. It would be quite important because, as I said, it's the nuclear resource center. There was a video that was showing Nevatim being attacked and being showered by missiles, and there were reports of Israeli soldiers being harmed and being receiving medical assistance in Nevatim. Probably the big hit was the hit of the infrastructures in Haifa, because we already discussed this. It is very important for the Israeli economy, for the keep the country going. An interesting hit was against a Israeli company that actually builds semiconductors that are actually used in many of Israeli weapons. That could be that is probably not an immediate damage, no, but is or in the medium term may have consequences. And overall, since the Iranians are using a mix of low precision, low accuracy, high accuracy systems, there is plenty of collateral damage because Israel is small, is densely populated. They are many of the military targets are near civilian targets, so there's been plenty of collateral damage in Israel. Here we have, in this video, here we have an hypersonic entry vehicle. As you can see, there is quite a difference between the ones that we have seen before. I don't know what was hit here, but yeah. I definitely would not like to be the person who took this video because the impact was probably 100 meters away or so. Okay, and now we are ready to get to the last part of the live stream. We have been live streaming for 1 hour and 43 minutes. This is probably the longer live stream I've ever did. But as I did before, let's have a look at the chat and have a pause. Apologies, I forgot to turn down the volume. I think that missile struck Flo on the head. That's why he's chatting shit and confused. Okay, no comment. Scare my neighbors too. Yeah, that was quite impressive. Guys, have you heard about the big U.S. Air Force tanker sortie from the U.S. mainland yesterday? Yes, I've heard that. They all went to Northern Europe because there is a relatively large training exercise centered on Finland in the next few days. So I don't think that they are connected with the situation in the Middle East, to be honest. So thank you to Eduardo Rocha for becoming a new member. So that's the thing. They have imposed censorship in Israel. It is forbidden to film and publish hits on military now. Yes, that's true, which is basically a confirmation that it happened. I heard that Germans are doing air refueling to Israel. So it is true that Flight Radar 24 was showing an A400, which is a transport aircraft. I don't know, honestly, if the Germans use it as a tanker, but it is definitely a transport aircraft that was flying over Jordan. Well, flying over Jordan was probably not tanking, because the Israeli paid a lot of attention not to fly over Jordan in their attack missions. So I think it is unlikely. However, Germany, the new chancellor, is unapologetically on the side of Israel in this fact. So I wouldn't be surprised that covertly they did something like that. But yeah, I don't recognize the world I'm living in anymore. Okay, how many people? 412 guys. You are fantastic. You are keeping up. I mean, thank you for spending so much time listening to an average guy babbling. Okay, short stop. Let me drink something. And then we dive straight into the part that I believe is the most important, the lessons that we can draw from the first days of conflict. So let me drink something. Okay, lessons learned. The first one is that anti-ballistic missile defense actually works. It was not that clear, but definitely before, but definitely works. If the interception rate is 75%, it's pretty good. But it's good up to a point. The missing a quarter of the target of the missiles is quite a large fraction. If it turns out, when everything will be said and done, that this is a realistic percentage, and I think that maybe it is going to be. We are moving toward that direction, because the Iranians are using more effective missiles than now. Then there's still quite a lot left to be dealt with. It can still do quite a lot of damage. And in fact, it seems that the MARVs that are precision guided can do a lot of damage. We have videos that I've shown you, videos of at least 3 hits that seem to hit precisely or accurately enough to destroy a launcher, which is a great thing. So the ABM systems should defend an area from ballistic missiles, but they can it seems that they can defend themselves from the ballistic missile. That's quite significant, no? And so it's the kind of weapon that you won't do. So ABM seems to be something that you won't do without, because it still erodes quite a lot of the attacking party, but it's not as effective as you wanted. And here we are still in fully conventional operations. If you start thinking about nuclear operations, 20% of the warheads going through, it's a lot. it's definitely a lot. And then there is the logistic problem of the depletion of the interceptors. These missiles are complex and expensive. Only few can be built in every year. So the depletion of these, the use of these weapons is becoming has the potential of becoming a problem. It is possible that the degradation of this interception rate that seems to be happening, it could be due to the fact that they're trying just to save rounds for the targets that they believe are more important. And this is so the depletion of the interceptors to get the ballistic missile intercept, together with the depletion of the precision guided munitions, are the two trends that we need to follow to really understand what is going on. So overall, anti-ballistic missile defense is something that you want, that is working, but it is showing limitations. The other important lesson seems to be, I'm quite surprised, but seems to be that the Western style COMAO works. COMAO stands for Combined Air Operations. So these operations where you have a package of aircraft that has several tasks to be executed all together in a very coordinated manner, and so on. There are some aircraft that attack the ground-based air defenses, followed by other aircraft that attack the ground targets, all defended by other aircraft that fly the air-to-air missions and so on. This kind of very coordinated operations works. The Israeli in the first day, at least in the first day, demonstrated it very, very clearly. The first day the strike was done was a masterpiece. And probably as a consequence of that strike, they keep operating inside the Iranian airspace. Even when, according at least to the Iranian, the air defenses are back online. As I said, it's very strange that we don't see engagements. Now, and the possibility is, if it is just the F-35s that enter contested airspace, they are working extremely well. Exactly like they have been designed to work. If it's not just the F-35, it either means that the Iranians have very little air defenses left, which seems strange, or they're consciously deciding not to engage, which seems strange as well. There is also the possibility that maybe just the F-35 entered the Iranian airspace, but the Israelis just launch long-range weapons from Iraq, so they're out of reach of the Iranian air defenses. It's a possibility, but we have seen weapons that are not long range being used. So again, it's a number of questions that we have on how things are going. But overall, the concept that around which the Israeli actually structure their offensive operation is absolutely classic Western style, NATO style, and it works. In fact, they definitely seem to have their superiority in the area. So this is important in the light of the confrontation with countries like Russia or China, because there is a very important doctrinal difference. The Russian Air Force, you know that I'm writing a book about the Russian Air Force and the doctrinal thing. The Russian Air Force has been accused in Ukraine of being incapable of doing commandos, okay? And when it was never designed to do so, their idea, the Russian Air Force is designed to be mostly defensive and to adjust the, let's say, to do battlefield interdiction at most. The long-range missions is left to long-range weapons, cruise missiles, and so on. So the Russians are different. The Chinese, on the other side, are trying to replicate the Western doctrine. The Russians are always asymmetric. They do something different to confront Western-style operations. The Chinese are doing both because why not? And they're trying to get to the same level of proficiency, which actually is extremely difficult. They requires a lot of training. It's also a cultural framework. It's important. So Comau, great, good, it works, but there are some more darker sides. So first, okay, the Iranian air defenses are not operating, seems to have been defeated, but how much of those have been defeated by operations that has nothing to do with Comau, okay? There is exactly zero possibility that a Western coalition would do the exact same this type of operation that Ukrainians did in Russia or the Israelis did in Iran in China. There's exactly zero possibility. So it would be it's important to see where the difference is. And to be honest, we have seen some signs of failed attacks. Few, very few, particularly in the form of videos showing aircraft coming back with maybe some weapons still attached, so they didn't manage to attack. They didn't manage to hit their targets. So yeah, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work as well as it may seem. The other problem is that this type of approach of air operation is fantastically expensive, incredibly galactically complex. It is something that requires expensive weapons, expensive aircraft, expensive training, pilots with the train for a very long time. So you need the capacity. So the time that the pilot is actually qualified to or available to do this kind of operations and fresh trained and be capable of doing this kind of operation is a relatively short time. So you need to rotate, you need more pilots because you need to rotate them, and you can't stop the career of these guys just because you want to keep them in their role. The training for this operation is incredibly complex. The Americans had to set up red flags. Chinese set up their equivalent, which started slow, but now is actually an equivalent of Nellis. But so it is a very, very complicated thing to do. Very few air forces, very high end, can do this. And basically outside the NATO, basically all the air forces within NATO that are close allies with the United States work like this. We've seen the Pakistani doing something similar. We've seen the Israelis. No, and now the Chinese, but nothing else comes to mind, to be honest. And because it is complex, expensive, and blah blah, it is extremely difficult to sustain in the long run. So it uses the aircraft, after having flown a number of missions, they need to start needing additional maintenance. And mind, the hours flown in actual battle are quite taxing for the airframes and all the components of the aircraft. So they wear off more quickly, so that you will end up, if you keep doing this kind of operation, you will end up to at some point where you have most of your aircraft under maintenance. So it's difficult to sustain in the long run, particularly if you don't have, if you don't produce your own weapons, your own aircraft, your own spares, and so on. And so the question is, there's a legitimate question, that is, what happens if you don't win quick? In a situation like this, the Israeli Air Force can clearly do a lot of damage over Iran, but they cannot win the war. Their winning conditions of avoiding or stopping the Iranian nuclear problem is probably not going to happen. They will probably not force a regime change, and yeah, they will do a lot of damage, which is a problem. The Iranian capabilities will be degraded quite a lot, but it's not a victory; it's a temporary respite, and that is only that in general is also only creating more and more enmity that makes any diplomatic solution more difficult. So this is and if you think it is quite incredible that you have something so expensive, so resource intensive, so it seems so let's say effective, and but you can't win the war with it. At least there have been a couple of cases in which this air power won the war. Probably one, which is probably the Balkans, 1999. But that was it. Precision guided munitions are key. We have seen that to attack some targets, the accuracy of these weapons is extremely interesting, and you need precision guided weapons, not medium precision weapons, to do some activities like, for example, hitting a person in his bedroom, like we've seen before. And the point is that today we also have price appropriate PGMs, so that the JDAMs are really not that expensive. The JDAM kits really not that expensive. These are sustainable, but on the flip side, most of these weapons are actually very expensive and quite rare. So the sustainment and production is still potentially a problem, particularly if you don't produce them yourself. But I mean, the future is PGMs. Saturation works. So if you're on the right side of the price equation, saturation starts working. In the sense that it really seems that the Iranian ballistic attacks start depleting and saturating the air defenses. They managed to hit a number of targets around Haifa with a relatively small salvo of missiles. So it really seems that they are capable of the saturation actually works. And if it is working, then even moderate precision weapons are effective. I mean, even missiles that have a CEP, an error of precision in the order of 50 meters or 100 meters, something like that, may still have an effect in this saturation area because they can hit infrastructural targets, area targets, that is ports, railroads, large factories, large air bases, compounds, something like this. What is the problem? But what's the flip side of that? That you need a lot of missiles. So what you need to stay in the right side of the price equation, you need to have a lot of relatively cheap, even not, albeit not very precise, not very accurate missiles, and use them to saturate the defenses, and what remains is enough to do an important damage. And this made me think that suddenly the Oreshnik makes sense. I mean, that's the consideration that I did at the time as well, no? In a system that is capable of deploying from one missile 36 warheads and 36 ammunitions plus potentially decoys, it's instant saturation of anti-ballistic defenses. Maybe they can take take out the first or the second, but the third one will start peppering your area target. That this is what I believed, and if I am right, it is possible that we see a proliferation of this kind of weapons. So, for instance, if from one side precision-guided munitions are extremely important to hit some very specific targets, then still medium precision, let's say, weapons still have a role and may still have a strategic impact. And finally, another lesson learned is that you must learn your lessons. So, what Mossad did in Iran was seen before in Ukraine, but in general they did it before in Lebanon. They did some pretty serious and effective stunts. And but the Iranians, knowing what was possible, apparently were caught by surprise, which is probably it means that they didn't really worked on preventing this kind of situations. The Israeli infiltration-exfiltration capability with commandos was seen before, was seen in Syria, but it was not acted upon. They did it again in Iran, and the Iranians were not ready to, even at, say, considering the local security arrangements, they were not ready to deal with a situation like this. The drone tactics that apparently have been used to attack some of the air defenses had been seen in Russia just 2 weeks ago. Why they didn't start searching all the trucks coming, but traveling through the country? Maybe, just maybe, they could have intercepted one and understand and know that an attack was coming, and do something about that. The Houthis have shown considerable resilience to complex air operations. How did they do that? Maybe there was the case of studying what they did and learning a lesson there. But even at a basic level, the command model is well known. You know that NATO or NATO's Western style air force is fighting this way. What was done to fight it? Was anything done to fight it? Did they had a planning tactics that were capable of some sort even try to fight it? And there is another lesson to learn, is that the F-35s now are out in the open. Now they took part to an operation with all the stops pulled out. A good question is, what was learned about them? What did the Iranian learn? And I'm pretty sure that everything the Iranian learned will be in Moscow and in Peking, in Moscow and in China, in Russia and in China very quickly. So that's an interesting consideration. And this, after 2 hours and 12 minutes, is the end. I believe that we can have a few more, can take a few more comments, a few more chats, and then I should probably go to bed, to be honest. Do you think Iranian early warning radars even have a role here? How can an integrated air defense network crumble so quickly? That's the question that I can't answer. It shouldn't. So there must be something that we don't know that is causing this situation. It could be a specific choice by the Iranians. It could be that they really are terrible, basically. Yes, they could have sensor data on F-35, but the Russians probably already had that. But what did the F-35s record, and how valuable will that be? I'm not so sure that the Russians already had that. And surely not very quickly. They didn't know much about this, that aircraft. Maybe Chinese knew something more, but the data could be extremely valuable if you have the radar signature of the aircraft. But it's not giving off a lot of radar signature, but if you understand how it looks like on a radar, even though it doesn't look like, doesn't appear as an aircraft, then you may start doing something to be able to ensure that you're capable of detecting it, for example. So it is extremely important. It is extremely important to see. It is extremely important to record, for example, the radar emissions. The F-35 radar is very difficult to record because it works. It is a probability of intercept radar that it works in a very sophisticated way. But if somehow they manage to record those emissions, that would be extremely important. Is it cost-effective way to invest in missile defense for US or NATO today? Because you can see the saturation attack is much easier. as I said, you still want some of your key targets, some of your the score. The Americans sometimes they call them center of gravities. So you still want your center of gravities being protected somehow, not being completely exposed, because some protection is better than no protection from this point of view. Surely, saturation is easier, so it's not possible to have a large scale defense. That's the objection that many have against the Golden Dome project, the one that recently Trump announced that it's a sort of Star Wars 2.0. That's the main problem that I see about it, but there will be a video dedicated to that. What do you think about naval radar systems to discover damning Serbians when they take down F-117 B-2 Spirit of Missouri? B-2, I didn't know. The F-117, of course. No, I mean, the old systems that work at low frequency with fighters that are actually optimized for stealth in expand, they have the possibility of detecting them. It's easier for them to detect them. So, so the fact that you can't guide weapons with those radar tracks means that you need to have some form of integrated air defenses, such that you can get close to the aircraft and then have some other sensor that is directing the weapon against the stealth aircraft. And so you need this level of integration. And it is slowly being built. It is slowly being built, but it takes time. It takes time. There are plenty of Russian and Chinese systems that work in this way. Okay, where is Otis? Is he sleeping? No, Otis is still in the UK. Remain at home in the UK. In this case, he will come with me to Italy as well. I said at the very beginning, I'm relocating to Italy. I'm obviously not leaving Otis there, 100%. Okay, I think that we can end the live stream here. I had quite a good fun talking with you. It was quite pleasurable. I am planning, since I can't do a lot of videos because I'm in the middle of the relocation, and this will probably go on till August, my plan is to be 100% operational for September because it's the best time on YouTube. But I'm not in condition of making a lot of videos, so I will do live streams that are a bit easier to do. I will try to do a couple of live streams every week to see how things go. So, how many people are here? 339. My goodness, there's been a very almost no decline in the viewers. You have fantastic guys. So, thank you so much for watching. And well, see you next time. Have a good night. Have a good time. Whatever. All the best. See you. Bye-bye.